we'll go ahead and get started. So the agenda for today, first we're going to talk about how to engage, which, hopefully you're already popping in the chat. We'll do some brief introduction of our amazing panelists that have joined us, talking about the speakers. We'll have that panel discussion and then just talk briefly about why securely for student safety and wellness, as opposed to just, content filtering or other things that you may have looked at us in the past for. And then talk about, as we talk about being preventative and proactive, dive a little bit into securely aware and the whole student wellness, and then do some Q&A. So on how to engage, right? There's chat. So please chat with us. You can ask questions. There will be a Q&A at the end. We've reserved time for that. But please feel free at any time to go in. We do have people that are going to be answering questions in there. You will find handouts. There are some summaries of securely and what we're going to talk about today. Also, please feel to use reactions, to clap or thumbs up, or, tell us how much you like what's going on with a quick emoji. So again, with that today, we have M Cubed for you. Mindy's not able to join us today, but as I'm your host, Mike Jolley, we also have Mallory Jacobs and Matt Montoro with us. And what we'll do is we're going to dive into our discussion. But before I do that, I kind of want to frame the discussion, right? So what this series Safely and Securely is about, this is a monthly webinar. And the whole point is to increase the impact on student wellness and talk about, from a securely standpoint, what's coming up in 2023. So specifically today, we're going to look at exactly how districts are prioritizing wellness initiatives for next year, what districts can expect when it comes to new and emerging student wellness threats, and what products are out there or solutions are out there to help better support school administration, student services, teacher, basically anybody who is tasked with making sure students are safe and well. As far as our panelists today, first, I want to introduce Mallory Jacobs. Mallory is a school counselor at Whiston Elementary, and she's the lead elementary school counselor for Topeka Public Schools in Kansas. And she's also the School Counselor Association board member. So thank you so much for joining us, Mallory. Again, being from Kansas, she's working with all ages. She's done it for 11 years. She's also a leader in her state counseling and also has a radio show for daily motivation, which we'd love to hear, more about as we go through our discussion today. And then we have Matt. Matt is from North Pocono Middle School, and he is the principal there. Matt has a bachelor's degree in English secondary ed. He spent the first 6 years of his career as a high school English teacher in an urban district. And then he transitioned to North Pocono School District in 2009 as a school counselor after obtaining his master's in school counseling, and worked his way up the ranks as assistant principal and then principal since 2017. Now, Matt has spent his entire career meeting academic, social, emotional, and career needs of his students. Most recently, Matt completed his superintendent letter of eligibility from Marywood University. So, with that, we're excited, to have you here, Matt and Mallory, and we want to get your take on some things. What we want to look at today specifically, we've seen a few different waves of wellness threats coming in the past couple of years. We had the rise of social media, obviously, with new channels like TikTok growing exponentially. We've had a huge increase in cyberbullying, trolling because of all the use of the devices in these platforms. We had COVID, we've had distance learning. It just seems like, every day that there's new trends that threaten the mental health of the students. And, I speak to that not as someone who works at Securely, and I do work for Securely. I'm the vice president of strategic accounts, but also I'm a former school principal. I did it for just under a decade in North Carolina, worked in a district with about 30,000 students. And, we didn't really have TikTok then, but it was interesting becoming a principal when Twitter was coming around, 2007, 2008. And when people realized they have, almost free reign to make sure they let you know how they feel about you, but also others. And, those things are tough, right? For, a grown man to read some of that stuff. So imagine what it's like with kids. And, before I ask, Mallory some questions, just to draw on my own experience as we kind of go through this conversation. I mean, it's tough, right? Even years ago, I remember a scenario where there was an unflattering photo shared around of a student, and somebody put it on Twitter, and kids did the right thing. They came to the administration. We were able to get it down pretty quickly. But that student had noticed that hundreds of kids had liked and shared that before, right? And I just distinctly, I'm a father. I have two young daughters, one of them in middle school, actually. And I don't wish middle school on anybody, even though it's necessary. It's a tough time. But I just remember sitting with that father, with his daughter in the office, and she's just, she's in tears and he's in tears. And she's saying, Mr. Jolley, how do I go in the cafeteria tomorrow? How do I walk into class? How do I handle things knowing these kids, my classmates, people I thought knew me or liked me or at least respected me, liked this image or retweeted it or shared it? How many people screenshotted it, right? Who's got it? So as we talk through this today, we're going to talk about, how big this impact can be on students and how easily it can happen. I was born in the 70s, grew up in the 80s. And, if a kid was bullying me after school, I could walk home a different way, but now it's not that easy. Kids can be harassed in an instant online, on social media. And not only can there people they know do it, it can come from across town, across the state, across the country, or across the world. So it really has just heightened the awareness for, what potential things out there for students can make it tough, right? School's always been hard, right? It wasn't easy for me. But I think it's even harder now when you look at the mental pressures and other stuff that are coming along, particularly from that. So with that, Mallory, let's start with you. What has your district seen in the last few years, and what hurdles have you come up against most often when it comes to student wellness? And then how is your district preparing for more preventative wellness measures next year?
Awesome. Thank you so much, Mike. And everybody, thank you for joining in. What a great question, and how much it's changed over the past couple of years, especially when we give everybody Chromebooks or laptops with distance learning and give them all the free reign. So I think we can all agree about social media. We share things out. We want our kids to watch educational things on YouTube, and then how quickly it can turn on a dime. So being aware of all of that, having those surf blocks, having those parent blockers, you can have them, but these people are smart. They can get around them as well. Yeah. And so another thing that we've also run into, especially at the elementary, kids are starting to get phones. Sometimes they're nicer than my phone. And I'm like, hang on here. But teaching them how to use it. Why do you have this phone? It's there to be helpful, not hurtful. So a lot of situations we have had in the past, and actually currently, is with Snapchat. How you can use that in a positive way, but also how things can really, really hurt. And so at the elementary level, we're really starting to build that foundation of, if you're not going to say it in a microphone with your entire family or show an image to your entire family, why are you sending it out? Why are you going to say these things to people that you don't know who they're going to show it to? Right. So really having those meaningful conversations, and then also having parents be aware, because parents are busy. You have jobs, you have other kids, you have meetings, and kids are smart. So making them aware of things that are happening. You can say all day that we don't allow cell phones in school, but kids are smart. So they might bring them in. They might use them in the bathrooms. They might use them in different areas. But we also talk a lot about using them properly if you have to use it at school and at home. A lot of things that happen at home come into school. And so how we really try to draw that line, especially with administration and upset parents, saying, well, what's the school going to do about this? Well, where did it happen? But we also know in reality that even if it did happen at home and not on our campus, it's going to come into school. So kind of teaching those kiddos how to navigate that, just like you were saying, Mike, with your story with that girl. How do you navigate that? How do you navigate that as a dad? That's really hard, and that's really traumatic. So really building those social skills and building that foundation of what's appropriate and what is not. Some of the things that we've run into is the lack of knowledge. There are some apps out there that kids use that we don't even know about yet until it's too late. And that's really scary. But also teaching them how to use it for good. Be on TikTok, but look at the positive things. Look at the positive speakers. Look at those motivational things. TikTok is fun. I mean, I'm on it personally. It's great. I love watching the cleanup videos.
Right.
It's but really using that for your advantage. And maybe how can you make a positive TikTok? How can you use it in a good light? And if something does happen, how do you pick up those pieces? Because that's real world. That's real world. That's real life. So that's what we have been dealing with at the elementary level for sure.
Mallory, one of the things you said, the way you framed that about make a positive TikTok, do something, I love. I was looking just in conversations I've had around digital citizenship, right? As we help districts get set up with Securely and our parent app and other stuff. One of the conversations we always have are, digital citizenship is a part of all this, right? When it comes to filtering and monitoring and who's out there, and it's important. I love the way you were framing that, almost like talk about the do's as opposed to a list of don'ts. Right. And I think, when you look at what ISTE advises on digital citizenship, it's very similar, right? It's talk about do's, talk about it from a positive standpoint, because kids, they get don'ts all the time. Don't do this, don't do that, don't do that. I remember one of the things as a principal, I remember on the first day of school trying to walk into every class, you just see, wow, these kids are going into 4 different 90-minute classes and they're starting the first half an hour with everything don't do. Right. And I know we can sometimes get in the habit of that. So I just really love the way you frame that about, talk about the positive things you can do and the do's, not the don'ts. As far as lack of knowledge, I know that's hard too. It's hard. I work for an ed tech company and I still am blown away. Like, wow, I had no idea that was out there,
Right.
know what's going on. Are there anything in particular, and same to you, Matt, is there anything out there as far as resources for parents and knowledge that you've leaned on as a district, whether it's created by you guys or whether it's, a free national resource?
We did actually last year a digital citizenship course, and it's free and it's online, and it gives everything for different grade levels. It even includes like PowerPoints and things like that and activities for the kids. Mm-hmm. So we found it to be really beneficial, and it meets them where they're at. Like, they're not talking about boring things. It's like it's engaging, to be honest. So we found that to be really helpful for us when it comes to, as Mallory said, making it positive experience. It might have a negative outcome, but we're at least giving them the tools, because especially when I look at some of my 6th graders, we've got some that are definitely more immature and babyish, almost like elementary. And then we have some that are certainly savvier than others. And so to try and find that balance that it's still meaningful for both ends of the spectrum and everyone in between, we want to, so I felt that was one of the tools we tried, that we utilized to try and really teach that digital citizenship of this is a more positive spin.
Yeah. And as we talk, this is about safely and securely, right? And we're talking about moving into next year. And I think we always have to remind ourselves as educators and people that work with schools is, the impact all these things have, right? The quick and lasting, can be for a minute, can be for a long time, but so many things come from technology, and technology is amazing, right? I'm a huge proponent of digital learning and all the resources and things, the access to information it can put in kids' hands, but they have to know how to navigate it, right? We talk about, when you mentioned digital citizenship, but even things with wellness, when you're teaching kids to drive, right? I always say the driver's ed car has a brake on the passenger side. Why is that there, right? They're not driving for the kid, but they're still a kid, they're still a learner. And I think the internet is the same way in apps and devices and things that schools are providing. So when it comes to a good wellness program, a wellness foundation, it's really important to put those tools in place where a parent can pump the brakes, a staff member can pump the brakes, right? Somebody can do something to say, hold on. And, I'm not saying go have in-depth conversations with 3rd graders about, really tough topics, but you can have conversations with 3rd graders that are age appropriate. When it comes to, the things that deal with technology that can lead to mental health issues, or struggles with wellness and feelings of, self-harm and grief and all that stuff. There's some things you can start early, right? And I love those things. My children are in a very, very large school district, well over 100,000 kids, and they send out some really good resources of how to talk to your kids, right? Mm-hmm. And even break it down age appropriate, because you do need to have that conversation. And it's kind of the new, again, I go back to the 70s, 80s of the, beware of like people in vans with candy, and now it's the new conversation, right, of how to handle things with online, like somebody that you don't know reaching out to you. So, all those are imperative. So thank you, Mallory, for kicking that piece off. Mallory, one more thing before we move into Matt. What do you think districts can be doing, differently or even, better to support student services, right? You live and breathe that every day in your role and how you're involved at not only the school and district level, but the state level. How can they support student services and counselors, as we move into, 2023 and beyond?
Absolutely. So sometimes student services and counselors, mental health team, we get viewed as the extras, right? Yeah. which is okay. We are extra sometimes, but I think it's important to remember that we need PD too. We need training as well. So I think really taking advantage of those opportunities and those conferences that we can attend as school counselors and as mental health professionals in the schools, and really, really engaging with that. I'm so lucky that my school district allows me to do all of those. And there are so many available, whether they're in person or online. I know it's easier now in person, but sometimes when we're all across the US, a webinar is fantastic and something so easy that you can have, on your couch or in your office so you don't have to leave. But I think really, really focusing on that and also bringing in specialists. Our district brought in Dr. Lori, who was trauma informed care, and she came and talked to not only the mental health teams, but also the principals, also the paras, the people that are in the trenches that are really living this day in and day out, to what we need to be doing. What do we need to be aware of? PD is so important, and we wish that we could have all the days. And I'm sure some people that are in charge of PD are like, what am I going to do with these days? Take advantage of that.
Right.
There are people out there are professionals out there that are willing to help. So making sure that those are available, not just for educators, but for the extras, if you will, as well. And then another cool thing that we have implemented is an SEL night, social emotional learning night. One of our Title I nights, there's reading and math, but social emotional learning is so important. And again, going back to that building the house with the framework, let's do that. And let's do that together with our parents. It takes a village to raise a kid. So let's come together and talk about the issues that people are facing. Talk about the things that we can help with and help bridge that gap between home and school. So we did that last year and this year, and it has been fantastic. And then our school district also surprised us with a mental health day for staff. So they gave us an extra day in February off. We could do, it was just like I think it was a Monday. So we got to have an extra long weekend. Now, does that not help families because they have extra things to find for their children to do? Absolutely. But our school district put in place different things. Here are day camps that you can take your kid to. Here are different things that are free that you could take advantage of as a family, and really promote that family day too, if possible, if the parents didn't have to go to their jobs or careers. But that was a really cool surprise. And I will tell you that as a school counselor and as a staff member, that was such a cool thing.
Yeah.
For the district to do.
Yeah, it's amazing when you think about that, because there's so many students who are impacted by the adults, right? And with all the pressures that are put on teachers and counselors and principals, everybody, right? There's mental health is important for your staff just as much as it is for kids, right? We talk about kids aren't going to learn if they're not safe and mentally well, right? Well, how can staff members educate and maintain the wellness of students and well-being and safety if they're not well? Right.
Absolutely.
And so I absolutely love that your district recognized that. And not only recognize, parents get upset sometimes when school is called off, when there's, not there, but here's some things that you can do in that place. So just really amazing. Something, that I will share. I hadn't thought about, doing that for staff. So as I'm taking notes here, right, anytime we get people like both of you on a call, I'm learning just as much as our panelists are, about the things that are out there. So that's really nice. And I love the idea of the SEL night and getting people involved as much as you can get, community and parents, and give them that. Parents want to help. That's what I found, right? People would joke about becoming a principal, and the parents are the hardest thing to deal with. And, parents can be challenging, but at the end of the day, they're fighting for what's best for their kid in their mind. Right. And that's, how I always kept it in perspective, but they also, they want to help. They just don't know how. And so when you provide those resources for parents and community, so they know how, it makes their life a lot easier, makes them more mentally well, and can help them help you with their kids. So thanks so much for sharing that, Mallory.
Yes, thank you.
Great things to take away. All right. So Matt, your background, obviously super impressive. You're a teacher, counselor, looking at becoming a superintendent. And I imagine you got, quite a unique perspective on what the main issues are when it comes to student wellness, in the classroom, how it can escalate through student services teams, et cetera. So first of all, what do you think the priority should be for districts to focus on, and what help and support can we give the teachers and student services to improve student wellness?
Well, I think through this experience, it's still the pandemic was a building the plane or flying the plane as we build it, the kind of thing. And I want to say the same thing is kind of happening right now with, I think, reacting to the aftermath of that. And so we've always had mental health. However, I think that the after effect of the pandemic has made it more at the forefront, which if that is what it's going to take for us to address it in schools, have at it. I'm all for it. To me, I think it gives us more motivation to really address everything. And as you mentioned, before, the staff is such a critical piece. And as an administrator, when times were tough the last couple of years, I had a lot of tears in my office, and it wasn't from kids. And so those are the things that, as a principal, at least I had a little bit of the counseling background, but most administrators don't have that. And so to be able to support your staff in that way, and to get them ready to return back to the classroom and give them what they need, the resources they need, and help. One of the things I've been advocating for was a lot of self-care, so unfortunately I can't be the one that dictated a day off to achieve that. However, there are other strategies that I've tried to implement and do there that could be beneficial to the students as well as the teacher. And so those are some things that we've done. I've brought in a former colleague of mine that when I was an adjunct instructor, he's still a counseling professor, and he did a really nice workshop with our staff. So just as reminders and things that are practical and useful to everyone, because I think that, sometimes teachers will say, well, I'm sick of hearing about self-care. I don't want someone to tell me to do yoga or how to take a deep breath or whatever. And I get what they're frustrated, but at the same time that there are other techniques that can be utilized and very meaningful. And so we have done a lot of that to really give some more tools in our arsenal to kind of help us, so we're ready to stand up in front of the classroom and be effective educators. So that's been a big piece that I know that we've been trying to work on here across the board. I think that Pennsylvania is, as a whole, is offering or kind of requiring school districts to do this. It's called the SHAPE assessment. And basically it's to identify your needs, where you're strong and where you're weak. And it kind of gives that conversation starter as a district to say, this is what we're doing really well, and this is what we may not be addressing at all, and we thought we were. So the data is kind of going to drive, our efforts moving forward. So I'm kind of excited to see that piece. We've got also at our local intermediate unit has a mental health consortium, which is kind of made up of school counselors and administrators. And so basically it's a conglomeration of it. It's like a think tank a little bit, but it's also just of like, hey, what are you doing at your district? And what are you doing here? And so we're sharing things and also trying to kind of also maybe make things a little bit more formal. So at a local level and a little bit broader. So those are some of the bigger things that we're trying to do. And then at the student level, I'll share a situation. So during the whole pandemic, I spent a lot of time planning things that I wanted to do, basically realizing, hey, we're going to have a train wreck come last September. And we kind of did a little bit. I mean, there were just kids that would cry because they couldn't handle anything. Like, I can't get my locker open, bawling their eyes out. Just, they lost that coping skill and they just, simple things were very overwhelming. And so I expected that. I'm not quite sure my staff was ready for that until they saw it. As much as, like, I could tell them all that this is going to happen, but until you experience it, you're like, yeah, this is really happening. And then that's overwhelming to the faculty as well. So we had myself and the counselors, we kind of planned some programming to implement, and we wanted to be school wide. However, this was a learning lesson in my career where and it wasn't successful. And I'm proud to say, like, I had to overcome it. It was a tough pill to swallow. My efforts were maybe too big. And so the teachers already had a lot. And so I had to find something that was basically going to be helpful and did address mental health, but at the same time wasn't an extra burden for my teachers and for my counselors. And that's kind of where I found Rhythm, the Rhythm app. And so we have found it to be very effective. I think responsive with the students. Some of the faculty members are buying into it as well. And it's not overwhelming my school counselors. I have 2 in a building that we have almost 700 students here. So it's been manageable. And we know it's a team effort. We're constant, we do these check-ins a couple times a week, and we're happy. We're pleased with it because we're also identifying students that, quite frankly, we would not have necessarily touch base with because they might be our really high achieving students, but they get anxious too, or they might be hungry, or they might be sad. They experience the same thing every other kid does. So those are some of the things that we've been kind of doing more recently.
Yeah, that's awesome. And for those of you that don't know what the Rhythm app is, Securely and Rhythm partnered a few months ago, and the whole idea behind the Rhythm app is to let kids have an outlet, right? Let them be able to express what's going on. There's an easy way. Teachers they're doing attendance, they're passing things out, they're setting up for the day, and kids can take 60 seconds to 3 minutes to go in and use an emoji based check-in, right? Of how they're feeling, like you mentioned, Matt, giving data. Are they hungry? Are they, how are they feeling? Are they stressed? Right. So giving that, and I think you said something really important when you said 2 counselors to 700 kids, right? That is hard. And Mallory, I can imagine you've dealt either currently or in your experience or seen it around the state where there's, way more than that. Sometimes in some cases I've heard of 1 counselor to 500-600 students or more because of scenarios that are going on or shortages, or whether it's staff shortage or funding. And that's tough because you don't want to be seen. Mallory mentioned extra earlier, right? And you want to make sure that counselors can do their job so they can help kids, that administrators can do the same thing. And when you are in a situation like, 1 counselor at every 350 kids or more, you may not be able to help that, but using tools like Rhythm, using tools like Securely, you can narrow down and really focus on the kids that need it. And you can do that in a variety of ways, right? Rhythm is going to tell you what the kids are willing to report, and say, but not everybody is, right? They may not want to disclose that, but they're telling Google, they're talking about it there. They're telling their friends in an email, or they're writing about it, expressing themselves in a Google Doc, or, in Docs and Drive. So, there's a lot of different ways that you can use technology, and that's what we're talking about, right? Not just Securely and Rhythm, but there are lots of different technologies that can help fight those things, right? When it comes to overburdened, having large caseloads, but it really lets you narrow down, because not every kid is saying I need help. Not every kid is willing to say I feel this way or I feel, but they're either willing to tell you on an emoji, or they're going to tell Google, why do I feel sad? Why don't people like me? What are the signs of depression? I mean, look, we serve 11 million kids, and knowing what's coming in every single day here at Securely, it's hard. Right? Knowing that there's kids out there going through it, knowing that there's staff and adults going through the same thing. Why don't my students like me? Why do they keep disrespecting me? Why won't so-and-so do their homework? Right? It's mental health is an issue that impacts all of us. So I'm really glad that you brought up the Rhythm piece, Matt. And then Matt, my last question for you is, with your background, right, with your perspective, and moving into, eventually moving into a superintendent position, is there going to be any, like, a certain approach or differences that you would take, in leadership with the background you have, particularly with counseling?
So, to be honest, I mean, I have the credentials, I guess. So I someday may aspire to be a superintendent, but I'm very happy with what I do. But I think that each kind of level or step I've taken, I've always never lost sight of where I came from. So when I was a counselor, I never, and even still as administrator, don't forget what happens in the classroom, because it's easy to have tunnel vision and forget that. And I think the same thing as if I were to get into district office and be running a district, it's easy to forget what a principal's dealing with. More so, when you think about challenging parents or just some of the other headaches you have or whatever, so I would hope that I can continue that momentum and of keeping a broad view of my experience, to make sure I'm making decisions that do inform and help everyone. I think at the end of the day, I'm a big advocate for mental health. I use an analogy that, we all carry an invisible backpack, and we all have mental health, but we don't know what's inside that backpack. So, when we look at somebody's face, we don't see that. So I think that's really important to, always keep in the back of your mind when you're kind of making those decisions and the impact that they can have on others.
Awesome. That's great. And I love that. I'm going to steal that as well. I'm going to share about the mental health day for staff. And I'm also going to talk about that invisible backpack and what we carry. So I just really appreciate, Matt and Mallory, you coming on here today, giving some time away from students to share your perspective with everybody else. I know the participants have learned a lot. So extremely grateful. Participants, if you have questions, you can pop them in. What I'd like to do before we move into the formal Q&A is just talk a little bit more, as we mentioned, about, safety and wellness and being preventative and what Securely can do. And I think one of the biggest parts of that is, looking down and drilling into what makes Securely different. What are our differentiators, right? And when you look at the entire suite that we offer for safety and wellness, and, we're going to give you the complete and holistic picture, right? And that's from those check-ins from the Rhythm app. That we just mentioned. That's from what students are putting into the Google searches, what sites they're going to, right? We're going to give you all that, and then moving beyond reactive tools and into preventative interventions. And I'll dive into that in a little more detail. But the whole goal is to allow schools to be more proactive versus reactive. And again, those preventative tools are imperative with that. Providing reliable alerts, right? We mentioned, again, if you've got one counselor serving 350 kids, that counselor, the administrative team, they've got to know quickly when kids are struggling. So they've got to know who's struggling, and they've got to know that so they can act on it. Identifying student safety and wellness risks in Spanish. We know that Spanish is the second biggest language spoken in U.S. schools, and students will search in Spanish. They'll write emails in Spanish. And so we want to make sure, as our commitment to serve all kids, that we are able to provide that layer of protection and monitoring in Spanish. And then obviously prioritizing student privacy, data and security. As we talk about stress, kids are stressed about their privacy, obviously, right? That they care about that. They care who's watching them, who's monitoring them, all those things that happen. And that in and of itself can cause stress. When you have to worry about, adults, parents worry about their kids' data, and all those things. I had a friend took her kid to get her driver's license, and they found out that somebody had stolen her identity. 16, big day, coming to file stuff, and they're like, nope, you're another person. So it's stuff like that. So it's top of mind, not just for adults, but also it's something kids have to be aware of. And so when you talk about how Securely, prioritizes that, we take steps where we work with third parties like I Keep Safe. And they put us through an annual certification to make sure that we're being great stewards of that data. We're SOC 2 compliant, and only folks on the tech side may appreciate SOC 2, type 1 and type 2. But in a nutshell, it's very rigorous. And it just makes sure that you're doing the right stuff when it comes to privacy and security with the data. And then we're also signatories on the Future of Privacy Forum Student Data Privacy Pledge. So all those are important. And I would ask, as we talk about solutions, and again, Securely is not the only solution out there. We want to just make sure that districts are putting in what they think is best to keep kids safe and well. So when you are vetting solutions, whatever it is, just make sure you're talking and not just about functionality, but also about data security and student privacy, because that's important. You want your students to have that level of trust that they know that the district is, they know they're going to be monitored on a bus, right? They know they're going to be monitored in the parking lot, on the playground, right? These things happen. And when it comes to technology, they also want to make sure they're monitored by somebody that's trustworthy and they're not going to like it, right? But I'm not going to tell you that, but they need to know that they can trust it and that you're taking those steps. So let's talk about Aware. It's the only really solution I'm going to focus on today, just for the next 3 to 4 minutes. But the whole idea behind Securely's Aware, as you see here, safeguard students. Students are dealing with self-harm, suicide, depression, bullying, violence, and we really want to use our Aware tool. And some of you may have known of this as Auditor in the past, but nobody likes to be audited. And so we think Aware is a much more fitting name, particularly with the new innovations that we've just released over the last 4 to 6 weeks when it comes to Aware. The whole goal is to make you aware. So when you are that counselor serving 350 kids, when you are a principal, with 1 or 2 assistant principals, but you've got 2,500 kids at your school, right? It's so you're aware of students who are struggling the most. Well, how do we do that? We do that because Aware can pull in student searches. It can look at the sites. Aware's lets you to look at the email sent and received, email attachments. You can, again, go in and see into Docs and Drive and what kids are typing with their free. I never realized Google Doc could be used for bullying until we had a school district reach out and say kids are creating a document, sharing it with their friends, putting nasty stuff in there about a student, and then sharing it with that kid. Imagine being 14, opening up a Google Doc a friend shared with you or a supposed friend, and it's 5 kids writing nasty stuff about you just so you would intend, right? That's hard. I mean, it's just, kids are creative in great ways and kids are creative in awful ways. And so we want to make sure that we're, encouraging with the good stuff, but also we're discouraging the bad stuff and monitoring to protect for that. So, as we get in and we talk about a little bit more preventative, I want to focus on 2 new features that are with Aware. One of them is called the Wellness Pathways Widget Intervention. And again, kids turn to Google when they want to know things, right? If I want to know what shoes or clothes my middle school age daughter wants at back to school, I just look at the search history and it's going to be super specific. Right? When it's shoes, it's the size of the heel or the size of the shoe, the color, right? Brand, super, super specific. And kids get the same way when they're struggling, right? They put all that detail in. And so, we are able to leverage, basically what they're doing in the search to determine whether or not that student may be struggling. And if they are, we're going to be able to pop a message and you see it right there on your screen. So if I'm a student, I'm searching for things. Why am I sad? Why am I depressed? Why does nobody like me? My wellness level within Securely is going to change. And when that wellness level drops, right? Securely is looking at everybody. We're coding your kids with Aware, green, yellow, red, like a stoplight. And then we add in that kind of purple, kind of Mayday-ish. But think of it as a stoplight, right? Your green, yellow, red, and your data determines that. And I do want to highlight that this is not demographic data, right? It doesn't know your age. It doesn't know your race, your religion, your sex, right? Because people can be nervous about monitoring. When we talk about trust, this just knows your school email ID and what you're looking at, right? What you're doing, what you're writing. So I think it's a great way to safely say it's an unbiased way to look at what students are doing and to assess their wellness. So let's say a kid is green, but they move to yellow, right? Or they're yellow and they move to red. When that wellness level drops, this is going to pop up in front of them, and the school district can customize the message. And you'll see a sample message here like, look, school's hard. It's really tough, and here's some resources on the right. So a kid in real time who is doing work, right, typing in things that are adjusting their wellness score, in real time, we're popping this up to them saying, we get it, it's hard, here's some resources. And the school can customize this, talk to a counselor. Maybe I don't want to talk to a counselor, but maybe as a district, we want kids to have good resources when it comes to mental health, not what they find on their own. Because kids may find great stuff on their own, but they may also find stuff that's not going to be helpful or that you don't want them to find. And so we want to make sure schools can target. So we give them that opportunity. So this is amazing. Again, this is a new feature within Securely's Aware. It's called the Wellness Pathways Widget. But again, in real time, it's going to pop up when kids, their wellness levels changing. We're going to say, ding, 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 let's give a message to them. And that message is customizable by the district, and it's got these resources linked there. So I think, as a parent, as a former teacher, former principal, this is cool, right? There's probably a better way I can say it and, sound like a nerdy, older middle-aged man by saying cool, but it is, and it's helping kids. And that's the intent, to let them make the right decision without someone having to intervene. This isn't a principal getting involved. This isn't a counselor. This is immediate push to them and letting them have some resources and some help. All right. The next piece I want to talk about is think twice. Again, cool, right? I'll say that to describe it. We know kids harass each other. They bully each other all the time on different outlets, social media, lots of different stuff. So what we're doing here is when a kid is on their school device and there's an open text box when they can reply, whether that's Reddit or Pinterest or Twitter or YouTube, right? TikTok, you name it. If they start typing in something that looks like it's going to be hurtful, it looks like it's going to be, a bullying message or a threatening message, something like that, we're going to pop up a little, that little kind of red triangle, exclamation point, like, hey, and stop what you're doing. And, that exclamation point, when the student hovers over that, it's going to remind like, hey, is this hurtful? Are you sure you want to do this? And we know, yes, some kids want to be hurtful, right? We talked about that in the Google Doc example. Some do, and some aren't going to care, and they're going to send the message anyway. However, we know that a lot of students will do the right thing. And as we talk about Securely being holistic and being preventative, this is exactly preventative, because now that student who would have received that comment, they're not going to see it, right? So that's one less hateful thing, one less hurtful thing, one less, item that could be bullying that they're going to see, because Securely saw that this potentially could be a harmful, hurtful message, popped up this notice, and the kid did the right thing without a principal telling them you should have done the right thing, without a counselor telling them you got to do the right thing. So, if it comes to that, great. But again, as we talk about the theme of being preventative, the wellness widget, think twice, do that. And then the last part of Aware that I will talk about is the dashboard. That's something we've been working on for a long time. I know as a principal, it would have been great for me to walk in and open up a dashboard. And as we talk about that stoplight, that green, yellow, red, and even kind of that, purple higher level extreme, is to see what kids are outside of that green, right? If they're green, that's great. I don't need to see those, but I do want to see the kids that are in that yellow, that red, or that extreme, kind of really crisis mode. And Aware allows you to do that. So again, Aware is looking at that whole digital footprint on the school device. It's pulling all those things that, can pull in their searches. It's looking at what they're doing in Google, Google Drive and their email. And again, I say Google it works on Microsoft or Google, but it's pulling all that stuff in and just really showing you what's the mental health of your population in your school or district. And I think that's very powerful as we talk about how can we, moving toward 2023, what can we do to help kids? I could go over stats forever, suicide, second leading cause of death in middle and high school age kids. We could talk about the suicide increase, from 2015 to 2020 in the pandemic, and then how things have gotten even worse, since then, but we don't need to, right? We all acknowledge as educators, as leaders, that it's happening. And we know that there are things out there that we can use, like Rhythm, like Securely, Aware, that can really help districts be preventative and ultimately can help them identify those kids who may be struggling so they can help them, right? Matt, I'm sure you became a teacher because you wanted to help kids learn, right? And that's why you became a counselor, have the counseling background. It's why you became a principal. Mallory, same thing, right? Why do you get involved at a state level, in counseling? Why do you, do those things? It's because you care about kids and want to help those kids, same thing for me. So we're all in it for the kids and we know they're struggling. So if we're in it for the kids and we know they're struggling, we just want to make sure that we are utilizing things that can help you really hone in on those kids and be aware of who's struggling so you can help them with your scarce resources. I know we all wish we had more resources, but sometimes that's not reality. So with that, if you have more questions about Rhythm, about Securely, Aware, any of other safety and wellness tools, please reach out. You can email solutions@securely.com.